Hello and welcome to the Surveyor Podcast with James Baker and Jon Lever. Two chartered surveyors embarking upon a social media journey, locked in a virtual room with nothing better to do than to discuss everything surveying. And some things not.
Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Surveyor Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about selecting the right APC route. But before we get into that, Jon, would you like to thank somebody that we've had some comments from?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a comment, let me just find it. It was from Darren Foy. Now, we both know Darren from the 1913 Wilderness Club, plus other places. And he said, really enjoyed the first podcast, gents. Looking forward to catching the next couple. Oh, I was going to say, we've put a feedback form on the surfpod.com webpage now as well. Because sometimes I find trying to feedback on the actual podcasting systems is quite weird. I think Apple is the only one I found that was quite easy. So if anyone wants to give us any feedback, wants to suggest any topics, wants to suggest they'd like to come along and get involved and come along to a podcast, then they can do that all on surfpod.com now. And it's just on the webpage about halfway down the right-hand side.
And please do give us feedback, because that will help us inform topics and ideas for future podcasts and guests and everything. And actually
check it on our podcast.
Yeah, we can make sure that we're giving you as the listener what you want.
No.
Yeah, okay then. So off for today's topic then, different APC routes. So we'll start then, Jon, with the 24-month route, which is probably the one that most people are familiar with, certainly the one that I'm most familiar with. That was the route I followed as being a graduate with a degree. So do you want to kind of talk through what the requirements are a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks for this podcast, because I think the reason I want to go through these is because I keep meeting too many people. A lot of the time I spent as an RSS training advisor, 18 years, we met a lot of people getting on the wrong route. And I'm still meeting a lot of people on LinkedIn and through our online stuff. So I think this is a really useful one to just go through. So the 24 months, it's often called a 24-month structured training, or APC 24. Yeah. So it's got a lot of different names. It used to be called Grad Route 1 for those older ones amongst us.
I remember Grad Route 1, Grad Route 2.
Yeah. So basically it's for a candidate that hasn't really got any more than a couple of years worth of experience. So it's less than 5 years experience. You have to have an accredited degree. Now, 24-month one as well, actually, interestingly, is what a lot of the apprenticeships are kind of lining up for now as well. You'll get candidates who will be doing a 4-year or a 5-year apprenticeship, where they're at university, sort of part-time, day release or whatever they call it nowadays. So 1 day a week, or however that program works, for 4 years. And then in effect for the 5th year that I'm hearing about is that once you've graduated, you've then got to try and get your APC in that last 12 months post grad. So really the 24-month candidate is a graduated candidate who already has done a different type of degree style of learning that's accredited, not an apprenticeship, or it would be an apprentice candidate who probably is starting year 3 and 4 of the apprenticeship. So that's kind of the way into that. That's a pretty easy route. There's easy insofar as getting people on it and doing the right thing and choosing the right route. I don't think any APC route is easy. I think that's probably a bad use of words. And then also during that training period, there's a 400-day minimum diary requirement. So experience 400 days. People mix it up with hours, so let's make sure we stick with days. And 48 hours per year of CPD. So those are the general kind of pointers. You need to have a company that's kind of going to support you. You need a counsellor and a supervisor, preferably, and you'll be recording a diary over a 2-year period.
So when you say a company that supports you, so obviously we mentioned the structured training thing, and my understanding of that, correct me if I'm wrong, as you are the expert in this, that means that they do have to have an actual written structured training agreement in place. Is that correct?
Well, they used to, and now it's a little bit more fluid. I think there needs to be a commitment to supporting someone, and that's by having a counsellor in place. But again, I would challenge anyone who's a counsellor to say you are, you're not just there by name and just to tick a box. You do need to engage. And maybe we'll do a session on one of these for counsellors and supervisors in the future, because that's a whole topic on its own, that I could kind of go, and you'll never believe what else, sort of thing. So it's really a company that's committed to it and has a proper training regime in place with counsellors and supervisors. The supervisor doesn't kind of feature in the assessment resource centre anymore, also doesn't have their name on the counsellor's guide. It used to be supervisor and counsellor guide, so I think sometimes they get lost a little bit. But a supervisor doesn't need to be chartered. They can be a line manager is really the best person for that.
I mean, I've always taken that view when advising candidates. It must be your best person to be supervisor, line manager.
Yeah.
And I must admit, because it always used to be back in my day when I did the APC, it was very much you had a supervisor and a counsellor and they were both named and you had to register them on all your paperwork and everything. But they've obviously gone from that now.
Yeah, you seem to only need the counsellor.
Yeah. Which kind of led me to believe, and probably some others, does that mean the supervisor doesn't exist anymore? So it's a bit confusing.
Yeah.
But obviously the supervisor is your day-to-day contact really in the workplace. I think that's the way I see it. And counsellor is probably somebody who's chartered with more years experience and can
and the counsellor can be external. They can be
external. Yes.
So so that works, but you do need someone in-house that's keeping an eye on what you're doing and can verify kind of what you've been up to even just a conversation with a counsellor. So I think that's quite important. I think the other important thing to say is don't ignore the role of a supervisor, because 2 pairs of eyes on you and on your documents is better than 1 pair of eyes. So if you don't have a counsellor, because some of the other routes don't have supervisors. So I always say to people, well, if you should be getting people around you always to be looking at what you're doing, looking at your documents. You shouldn't just be relying on one person to do that for you. So that's the 24 months.
Okay, yeah. So that's the 24 months then. So
just a thought, actually, before we move on, a couple of pitfalls just on that thought process is diary recording. We get a lot of candidates. I often say to candidates, you need to kind of dedicate about an hour a month and then an hour a week, and then an hour a month. So about 4 or 5 hours a month to keeping this rolling in the first year. And there's a lot goes on. It doesn't really get too full on until about month 11, 12 into the second year. So in the first year, it's about getting into that routine of recording. And we find a lot of candidates don't do that. And then you get to around about month 10, and statistically, bizarrely, that's when we lose a lot of people to the system, where they just don't then progress because they haven't written up their diary. And all of a sudden you're up to 5 hours a month, 10, that's 50 hours. That's over a week and a half's worth of normal working time in admin that you haven't done. So that's where we tend to lose people. So we're always on about, just keep going, just trickle feed the process and just keep doing little bits as you go along. And well, obviously we've got our APC diary that people can have as well, which will help shortcut that process. But there's a few little pitfalls along the way where it's just about keeping on top of it.
Because the 24-month route tends to be pretty quiet, doesn't it, in the first sort of few months or so, maybe the first year even. There's not a lot going on other than recording diary and logbook time. And I think it's easy to, I certainly found that when I was doing it, to slip out of the habit of recording, and then you've got a lot to catch up on. You
do, and what we call, we're talking about it all the time at the roadshow, aren't we, where we're going, don't forget the admin lag. You don't want the admin lag to get in the way of you when you're trying to write your case study. So if you haven't written up all that summary of experience and your levels, you should be writing up your level 1s easily by the first year and into your level 2s as well. And if you haven't done that, then the challenge becomes that then starts getting in the way of the back end of the next year or your final year when you're trying to do everything else. So it's a great route. I think it's really works well. The diary ideas, the logbooks, CPD, you have to do 48 hours of CPD as well in that year. I think that all works well, but you do just need to keep the focus. And again, one of the things we had some feedback recently about the roadshow was the fact that it's on every week and it reminds them that they need to keep going. So that was quite nice. That was quite a nice byproduct of it.
Nice bit of feedback, isn't it? Okay, then. So that's a 24-month route. Then let's move on to the 12-month route. Now, I could probably think that might know what this is, but I wouldn't like to be put on the spot and tell you what it is. So I'll
I
leave
might
that
just
to
put
you.
you on the spot and ask you.
I'll leave that to you.
No worries. Yeah, so the 12 months route is very, very simply, if you have 5 years or more experience, you can in effect start at month 12. Okay, so I always talk to people about the APC process being a 24-month route and then where you slot into that 24 months. So in effect, a 12-month route candidate, or the old grad 2 as it used to be called, or APC 12 if it's called that, you will start at month 12 and do the last 12 months of a 24-month process. So it's always nice to kind of have that 24-month timeline. You go, okay, I'm starting halfway through.
Yeah.
So a 12-month candidate, again, credited degree, minimum 5 years experience. You have to put a resume together, send it to RICS so they can vet it and go, yep, that looks okay. And then you have to do, again, 48 hours of CPD in that year and a minimum of 200 days recording over that year period. But
So
to
it's
tell the
literally,
truth,
so it's literally half of the.
yeah, it's kind of half the quota. But to tell the truth, you're kind of hitting the ground running, because if you remember, we just mentioned doing all your level 1s in the first year and some of your level 2s. Well, someone coming in on the 12-month route with 5 years of experience shouldn't have any issues with level 2 and 3 because of that's experiences under their belt. What they're going to be challenged with is catching up on the level 1 and getting themselves up to speed. I mean, I don't know about you, but when you stop studying on the APC and you get into the niche area of work that you like, all of a sudden, you become an expert in one area and you forget the other areas. Well, that's the same for a 12-month candidate.
I was talking to somebody about that the other day, actually, how you tend to specialize once you get a certain point in your career and do you offer certain services to clients and you do specialize in those, and therefore the wider range of things that you learn when you do your APC, you don't forget them, but you can't recall stuff as quickly as you probably would at the time when you sit in your APC. And yeah, always as the age-old saying goes, you'll never know more than you do when you sit your APC, or that's how it should be anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a real point to bear in mind as well. The 24-month candidate is always going to have a challenge with accruing sufficient experience in that short period of experience time.
Yeah.
Anyone higher than a 24-month candidate, so 12 months got 5 years. If you go into prelim, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's 5 years. Go to the 10-year route. So you've got ample experience under your belt, but it is always about you're walking in that room as if you're going to set your own business up tomorrow. So you've got to know the depth and breadth of everything. And often it does. I often find it quite a challenge to not get grumpy about it. When the difficult bit is getting the experience and
it's not like
getting that right.
Though, is it, John?
No, I just get a little bit fed up, really. But the other point is there is so much effort you have to put into the learning, and so many people don't do that. And that's where we find referrals happening, is because they can't back up what they're saying with the right legislation or the right information, which then scary words like incompetent and muppet get thrown around, don't they, once they've walked out the room? So
no.
So we've got to make sure.
Of course they don't.
You don't ever call anyone a muppet?
No, not in an APC.
Well, not to their face, of course. It's a shame, though, isn't it, when you think about it? You've put all that effort in and you haven't gone and learned the latest stuff. And learning's so easy insofar as you haven't got to go and get the experience. You just got to pick the book up.
Yeah.
Go and do the grunt. You just got to put the hours in.
Yeah. Just to confirm then, so on the 12-month route, so as I said earlier, it's probably effectively half, but the 12-month route, you need to have an accredited degree. Is that right?
Yeah. Accredited degree, 5 years or more experience, and fill out a resume. The RSS then accept you in on that as long as that all lines up. And then you're doing exactly the same as a 24-month candidate, but you're starting at month 12 through to month 24.
Okay, so they're arguably the most two straightforward, then, you could argue, of the routes. So moving on to the APC Prelim. Now, I probably don't think I could confidently tell you what this is, other than I know they have to do a preliminary assessment.
Yeah, so the APC Prelim was designed a few years ago now. The thought process behind it goes, we've got lots of people out there who might not have any support, so let's do a preliminary review where two assessors will review their documents for readiness to go forward for assessment, or give them some comment, or actually, if their documents are so poor, then bounce them and say, no, you can't do this, you haven't got it right, go away and do it again. So it's a bit like a counselor role, really, but it's only at one point. I've trained, how many assessors? Probably over 7,500 now. And I still find the prelims a bit of a challenge insofar as someone will submit their paperwork, and it's their complete submission as well. They're sending in about 6 months in advance. So someone will send their paperwork in, and the assessors don't get an opportunity to ask them any questions. So you hope the paperwork's going to be good enough so they can only make a judgment call on the paperwork. And then that report will come back to the candidate, which if it says you're not ready for these reasons, then the candidate is looking at that going, I don't really quite understand that, but I've got no one I can talk to. So I hope in due course, we would see an improvement on that process. Maybe I think nowadays everyone's very much more accepting of internet and the the webcasting and stuff like we're doing now, and having the opportunity to maybe talk to someone to point them out. I mean, we do a lot of that, don't we, on document reviews, where we look at it and then we talk to the candidate going, right, okay, here's what I said and why I said it. So go away and do it again, because if you submit that, you're going to get sort of referred. So the prelim, in effect, is for these individuals out there that allegedly don't have much support. I do find a lot of people jump onto the prelim route because they think it's a fast track route, and it so isn't. And it is exactly the same amount of effort and energy, really, when it comes to the assessment. But the idea and intention of it is someone who doesn't have an accredited degree, but they do have an equivalent education, so a bachelor's degree or something like that. You've got to have 5 years of experience, and at least 12 months of experience has to be post degree as well. And then what you're doing is you're doing a bit similar to the other sort of routes further up the line, where you're doing in the previous 12 months you've got to show your 48 hours, and that 12 months is the point at which you're submitting your paperwork. So we know that we've got submission in February and March, or in August and September. So you'd work back from whichever one that you're going for 12 months, and you've got to do your 48 hours in that period of time. And then that's just leading into the prelim. So the prelim will happen just after. It's interesting the way the timing works. So if you were land and property, you sitting the assessment, you would submit in February. If you're sitting the prelim, you submit in March. And likewise, it goes March and April for built environment, and the same at the other end in the autumn. So those individuals.
So sorry to interrupt. So with prelim, you say submitting in the March, but that's the prelim, and then you wouldn't actually sit until the autumn session.
As long as you pass the prelim.
As long as you pass the prelim, otherwise you pushed back even further because
otherwise you then have to submit.
So it's no fast track at all, really.
No,
because you submit in full paperwork, and if it's deemed to not be adequate, then you've been pushed back 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have an accredited degree and you have over 5 years experience, as far as I'm concerned, you should do the 12-month route. You should do the APC with a prelim. But you see, because people think, I haven't got to do a diary or a logbook as part of the prelim process, they think it's fast track, and it's not. It's just not.
No.
So it's there for a set purpose. It is absolutely spot on for that purpose. But it's when we get candidates, and it is, I'm not going to beat about the bush. There's plenty of candidates out there who start out, then don't do anything, years disappear and go, and they go, I've got over 24 months now, so I can change route. And changing route doesn't really achieve anything. So we see that with the prelim. I've got 5 years experience, I don't have to do a diary, I'll go and do the prelim. But what they then don't realize is if you don't get through that 6-month review, you're right, you get bounced 6 months and you get to submit it again. So let's say you put your prelim in March or April this year, 2021, you were successful, you get to sit in the autumn 2021. If you're unsuccessful, you can submit again September, October 2021 to sit in the spring if you're successful in 2022. Yeah. So why wouldn't you, if you had an accredited degree, just do the 12-month route, sign up now and guarantee that you're going to get to the spring?
Because the time frame's exactly the same in essence, potentially.
Yeah.
It doesn't make much sense, does it? If you've got an accredited degree, why do that? So it clearly, that says to me it's not a fast track route at all.
No, well, none of the routes.
None of them are, and they shouldn't be. And all that seems to offer is less. I say less paperwork, not really. It's just no diary or logbook. So
to tell the truth, doing a diary and a log, well, not necessarily a logbook so much, but doing the diary is really useful to get your head around what you have and haven't got and what you have and haven't done.
It is, I'd agree. And then actually when you come to do your submission, you've got all your experience listed out, and you can recall that to put in your summary of experience in your final submission document. Whereas if you're doing the prelim route, you don't have that. You've got to try and go through, right, what did I do at work 2 years ago, or in the last 12 months, and
Yeah.
try and recall it all. And that's a real challenge, I think, to put the paperwork together.
So I think anyone who is approaching the prelim, like I say, it's an absolutely perfect route if you're approaching it for the right intentions and the right purpose.
Yeah.
So anyone approaching the prelim should look at this as it's a 6-month prep up to preliminary review, and then it's a 6-month prep from there, as long as you're successful, to get to the assessment. So it is a 12-month.
It's still 12 months,
process.
really.
Yeah, it is really. If you're doing it properly, and most people that we've mentored, and you've mentored some, and the other delivery consultants have mentored as well, through the process, it always ends up being about 12 months.
Yeah.
There's one other little catch as well worth noting. It's to do with the CPD, because it says 48 hours in the preceding 12 months. Now, that runs from 2 different markers, just to confuse it even more. So the first one is prelim. So let's say you're going to put it in April. You go back April to last April, and there's your 48 hours. Now, what you need to do is make sure you've got a nice spread across that year, because if it's all front loaded and it's the front end, you can guess where I'm going. When you get to the assessment, you go back 12 months, and all of a sudden, the first 6 months of that first 12 months, if that makes sense, drops off. So in
effect, it's 12 months to the point that you do the prelim submission.
Yep.
And then it's 12 months to when you actually do the assessment. So it's really 18 months, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So you're going to end up with 18 months worth of CPD, but you've got to make sure that
there's 48 hours in that 12-month period.
Yeah, absolutely, in the right period. Otherwise, assessors will look at that and go, hold on a minute, you haven't done 48 hours in the last 12 months. And a lot of people don't know that. And just to put another little plug in there, the APC Roadshow, you're getting CPD every week. So, we're kind of on for 48 hours worth of full CPD if you come along to the roadshow. So if you are a bit short, then that would make sense. And I think that's a really good opportunity for prelim candidates. And we talk about prelim and all the other routes as well on the roadshow. So, they're good opportunities. So APC Prelim, perfectly good route if it's approached in the right way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's either been misunderstood, or people think it's a fast track route, which is where, we don't see masses of success. And, the average pass rate's about 65% across all pathways. And that's kind of what the prelim's getting, probably a bit less than that last time I checked. So it's not improving the process. And that says to me that people are approaching it probably for the wrong reasons. Now, we've put plenty of people through it, and it's worked perfectly well. But you need to prepare. You need to prepare like any other candidate. I had someone the other day ask me, actually, how is the assessment different for the prelim to other candidates? It's like, it's not. It's exactly the same. So,
and you've got a preliminary assessment as well. So actually, you've got double assessment.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I guess we ought to caveat that, because the preliminary assessment isn't a preliminary assessment; it's a review. And I know it's a document
review, effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. So the assessors who are doing the review shouldn't actually be assessing the candidate. It should say, look, there's a level 2. Is there an example, a project example that sounds about right for that competency? Yes, there is. Right, cool. You might say, just make sure it is relevant and up to date, etc., in the commentary, but you're not going, is that the right project? Let me have a look at the detail. Well, that wouldn't cover the whole depth and breadth of that competency, therefore I'm going to put you back. It's not about that. It's for someone who hasn't put a project in. That would be the point that they would point out and make a note of. So I think it needs to be very careful the way it's dealt with as well, that it's a review. And sometimes I've seen in some of the reviews, you get a little bit of too much assessor personality. And what I mean by that is it's their preference. I've seen that in a commentary before where it said, oh, you must have 3 examples in your level 2s and 3s. And it's like, well, where does it say that? Go back to the candidate's guide. It says you should have an example. So it does get fogged a little bit by personal preference, which I don't have a problem if that's a comment, but if it is a judgment that then someone gets pushed back on, well, it's clearly not great, necessarily following the rules. So so it's like I say, great route if it's done properly. But the reason I wanted to do this podcast is because I'm literally in the last 3 weeks, I've spoken to probably about 8 or 10 people who are doing the prelim or doing other routes, who we've had a conversation going, you're really not on the right route.
Mm.
realize you could do this one, and it's like, oh no, I didn't know that. And then so hence why I wanted to do this podcast, just to hopefully give that sort of experience and knowledge out there. And if anyone does want to talk, then just drop us a note or drop onto our LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and get in touch.
Yeah, right, that's APC Prelim then. So up next is the 10-year route.
Yes. So the APC 10-year route. Now, funnily enough, you might hear this. So this used to be called Grad 3. The prelim's a whole brand new one, so it didn't have a previous name. Oh, actually, no, it did. It used to be called the Professional Experience route, and then it changed to the APC with a prelim. Do you remember that?
I remember the Professional Experience route.
Yeah, so it used to be called that, and then it changed to the APC with a prelim. So the 10-year route is our old, I'll call it the old Grad 3, as we used to call it. And the Grad 3 or 10-year route, it's also got another name called APC Other. I've never got to the bottom of why it was called
Other.
that. Yeah, oh, you just want the other ones.
APC Miscellaneous.
Yes, yeah, APC. I'll come up with another name and hopefully keep it clean. But the point is, the 10-year route is someone who has, again, accredited qualification. And as you would guess, over 10 years experience. So this is someone who is still, now you've got to be careful here. This is someone who's still at the coalface, so senior surveyor sort of level. If you were turning around to me going, oh, I've got over 10 years experience, I want to do senior professional, which is the one we're going to talk about in a moment, you would need to be away from the day-to-day surveying and more into the strategic management of the business. So we get a little bit of fogging, a bit of muddy water between this one and the senior professional route.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate then, accredited qualification, 48 hours worth of CPD in the preceding 12 months from the point at which you're submitting. You could sign up to it now and still submit your paperwork. Now is January, and you could still submit your paperwork in March this year if you wanted to. I wouldn't advise that for anybody because it still takes 6 months to get ready as a minimum, I think.
Yeah.
But you could fast track it if you put your head down and did nothing else but get your paperwork ready. So it basically gives you an opportunity to drop into the process whenever. But you need to take caution with that. Again, a good 6 month lead in. So anyone now wanting to do the 10-year route, I would say your earliest should really be the autumn. Give yourself, that's what, a good 9 month run into submission, and then you can go forward and sit.
So
if you to do it too early, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah. So who do you think the 10-year route's kind of aimed at then? Is it those individuals who probably got a degree, of maybe done certain jobs in, I don't know, experience I've come across, maybe public sector or something, where the APC wasn't really a requirement, they didn't need to become a chartered surveyor.
Yeah.
And then they've never really embarked on that path, but they're at a point now and they think, maybe I'd like to now follow through and become a chartered surveyor.
Yeah.
So this is an option for me. I got an accredited degree all those years ago. I've got more than 10 years, and then go through it. So just to be clear then, so what sort of paperwork and things do they have to prepare?
Okay, well, they have to do exactly the same as everyone else, but just not a diary and a logbook. So it's a bit like the prelim without the preliminary review in a way. But you need 10 years experience. What we tend to find, now I found this from when I was doing the RSS training advisor role, which I did for 18 years. And the hundreds, thousands of people I met, when you met a 10-year route candidate, more often than not, it's someone who signed up as soon as they graduated and then never progressed.
Yeah.
And university of life takes over, families come along, and that takes over. And I mean, all about that with your young whippersnapper at the moment. So that pressure comes along and everything. So you might find your sort of demographic of individuals will be probably mid-30s, something like that. Family has happened or is happening, and they're just now kind of getting around to it. Maybe career progression has been halted because they can't get past, because they need to be chartered to do that, so they've come back to it. Maybe they went and joined a different institution. We're finding quite a few people coming over from CIOB, for example, and wanting to kind of get into RICS, and a lot of those are quite mature candidates. So what you tend to find here is someone who's not necessarily grasped the nettle and gone with it. I mean, I don't know, how old were you when you sat it?
I think I was 29.
Yeah, see, I was 25. So goodness me, if I looked back and thought when my family started coming along, which was mid 30s, to think about trying to do your APC at that point would
Oh,
have
I
been.
dread to think doing my APC now. I've got a
I
youngster.
do feel for people who come to this quite late in their family career, let's say, and you've got all the stress and hassle of kids and everything else sort of kicking around. I can see that being quite a challenge. So what we tend to find is individuals who are in that place in a way. And so you're coming with 10 years experience, you're coming with 48 hours in the preceding 12 months, and you are going to have to do the diary logbook. Sorry, not the diary logbook. That's absolute rubbish. You're going to have to do the case study, summary of experience, and the CPD. All of a sudden got far too excited and mentioned the diary and logbook. So just to reiterate, make it very clear, 10-year route candidates don't do a diary and logbook. That said, the reason I probably said it was because even when we meet candidates who we support through that, we still get them sitting down thinking about what they've been up to and in effect putting together and mapping out a diary
Because
of what
it's a
they've been
useful tool, isn't it?
doing. It so is. And
It might
it's
feel like an irritating thing to have to do, or record a diary.
not actually that
Who
hard,
records
though.
a diary? But actually, it is really useful tool in your learning process, and certainly as I said earlier, it gives you that information to refresh your memory about the work that you've done. So
Yeah.
it really is quite useful, I think.
My worry with the diary, I know we're digressing away from the 10-year route, we'll come back to it in a minute. My worry with the diary is, though, a lot of people don't really understand what it tells the assessors.
Maybe we'll do a podcast on that.
Yeah, I think I will do, and certainly talk around sort of how to approach that properly, because we're seeing a lot of people making mistakes with that now, because they're not focusing or they don't understand what the output is and what it's screaming at us, basically. So coming back to our 10-year route candidate, what we also suggest, now you could in effect say, well, I've got 10 years or more experience. I could use all of that when I'm writing up my summary of experience. There is a tendency to find some quite old experience being put forward. I would still advise everybody, whatever route you're doing, the more recent, the more up-to-date projects and examples you can pick for your level 2s and 3s, the better. So a 10-year route candidate, I've always said to them, back as far as 3 years maximum, really, you really do need to be picking stuff off recently. You know, it's great you've got the experience, you could talk about that at the assessment if it came up or whatever, but really in your paperwork, you do need to be a little bit more current. And also, don't forget, everyone has to have a case study that's within 24 months at the point at which you're submitting it. So that's another interesting pitfall there for our prelim candidates. If you're doing your case study and it's 24 months at the point you're doing the prelim, you've shot yourself in the foot, because it will be over 24 months by the time you submit it for the assessment.
Good point.
So you've got to pick something I'd suggest in the last 12 months. And that's the same I give to everybody to think about.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, I think that's the 10-year route then. That pretty much sums that up. So that leaves one final route, and that is the senior professional. So we obviously talked about this briefly in comparison to the 10-year route. So do you want to go into a bit more detail about that?
Yeah, now the senior professional is very different, or at least it's set out to be very different. So whereas you'll get the 12-month, 24-month, the prelim, the 10-year doing summary of experience, case study, and CPD, the senior professional moved the one case study into 3 case studies, and they have more of a focus on leadership and management. So in effect, where we might say, I'll call them normal surveyors or normal route surveyor coming forward in the other routes, they would be probably 80% on competency and then 20% on conduct ethics, mandatories, and other general areas. You'll find a senior professional will be nearer 25% on competency. Because in effect, if you took you or I now, I guess, we've started up our own businesses, you could end up being in a position where, and I think you've probably held positions like this, I probably more so now as well, where you've stepped away from the surveying bit because you're managing the team. You're looking at the strategy, you're looking at the forecasting, you're looking at the marketing, the business development, all those sort of things, leadership management and those things. That's kind of where a senior professional's at. So you're talking director, CEO, chairman, maybe at a push commercial director in the built environment world, but someone who is very much more managing the team rather than actually at the coalface. But they must understand what the team's doing, because they're all about making sure the job is being delivered properly. So our senior professionals might be someone Now, there's two ways into this one, actually. One is with an accredited qualification and 5 years experience, or the other one is without an accredited qualification and 10 years experience. So you could be a member of other institutions maybe as well. And that's the same for the prelim as well. So it's worth reading around the entry points, because if, for example, the prelim, sorry to bounce around, but these things are quite important as they come up. If you had someone who was a member of the CIOB, so MCIOB, and you've been MCIOB for over a year, you can actually get into the APC with a preliminary with that as an entry point. So you wouldn't need to go and get or have other qualifications necessary, because you've already been a member of another institution for a period of time. It's not a direct entry. You still have to do the APC, but it is a way of getting in. So it's a bit similar in a way with senior professional. You could be a member of other areas or other bodies, and as long as you've got the experience under your belt, you can come in at that one. I think my worry with senior professional is that we see people who aren't senior enough coming forward.
Yeah, so that brings me to a question that I was going to ask then. So is there a definition of what a senior professional is? Because it seems fairly loose. 5 years experience accredited degree, but you've got the 12-month route, which is 5 years experience accredited degree. So surely to follow the senior professional, does it state that you must be...
Yeah, there's characteristics that you have to tick.
Okay.
And in your case studies, the 3 case studies you're writing, 1 has to be on leadership and management, and then 2 can be on your technical competencies.
Right.
My concern with senior professional, and whenever we're mentoring people, we always say this to them and remind them, is you've still got to understand your competencies. There's no summary of experience for a senior professional. So they do a resume about who they are, and they do a 400-word statement. Then the only thing they're really putting forward is their case studies. Their presentation, interestingly, is more of a career presentation, not a specific case study project. So it's quite different, and the assessing is different as well. I often joke and say it's akin to, APC candidate, come in, sit down, we're going to ask you lots of questions and have a conversation with you. Senior professional, it's more of a come and have a seat by the fire, grab yourself a cup of tea, and let's have a chat around what you've been up to. So we end up walking through each case study. So instead of working your way rigidly as we kind of tend to with other APC candidates through the
so it's less competency based questioning.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's a really interesting, it's quite a difficult one to explain. When you're assessing a senior, well, let's go. If you're assessing an APC candidate, you go level 3, tell me about a project you worked on, where you gave advice, what advice you gave, and why did you give it, and what's the basis and the reasoning behind your advice. If I was asking the same question of a senior professional, I might ask them about how they led a team that was giving that advice, or how did they oversee that the project was being done appropriately? How did they resource that project? And what experience or criteria were they looking for that would then start to tease out the competency areas? And what was the role that had to be under? How did they quality control that? And how did they make sure the client's requirements were delivered? So it's very much more the strategy, the people, the resourcing, but understanding the job. Yeah. So you've been there and done it in years gone by, and you understand what a contract is, or you understand what the red book is, but you're not the one who's actually delivering that per se, but you are overseeing it all and making sure strategy wise and leadership management and all those sort of things come into play.
Yeah, making sure the standards are kept amongst the staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And to tell the truth, we do see quite a high pass rate in senior professional, because there's a lot of vetting before you kind of get there. And as long as you understand,
also kind of hope that somebody who's designated or classed as a senior professional is exactly that, though.
Yeah,
that they are very professional. They've been successful in their career, and they're not just they know what they're doing. So you would hope that that's the case. So that's kind of reassuring to hear.
Well, no, indeed. And I think probably only now in the last 5 or 10 years, I kind of feel competent to be an assessor of senior professional, because I've had that experience. I've got the grey hair, and to kind of give that sort of air gravitas, I guess, that you're being assessed by your peers, not by some, dare I say, sweaty young surveyor who's just got their charter, who probably, doesn't or couldn't kind of articulate the competency areas that needed. The thing we do find, however, with senior professionals is also, there's quite an interesting spin on this one. is that as far as I'm concerned, so their interview goes 25% technical, 50% leadership management is the balance it should be. But there's a 25% balance on conduct and ethics. So now a normal candidate, let's call them normal again, you might see probably 10, 15% of the interview might be, well, not even that much, will be on conduct and ethics. We'd expect it obviously in the questions that are coming out and the answers, but we wouldn't necessarily focus on conduct and ethics for, 25% of the interview. So you've got to look at a senior professional and consider them also. They're a role model. So knowing conduct and ethics is again a pitfall for them if they don't pay enough attention to that. I remember being told once that there was an interview where the chair asked the senior professional candidate that they were going to have a chat around conduct and ethics, and he opened up his briefcase. He goes, "Oh, this," as he waved a copy of the rules for members of firms at the panel, to which the chair said, "Yes, that's the bit we want to talk about." He said, "Oh, I haven't read this bit yet." He says, "Well, you pop that back in your briefcase and we'll have a chat." And obviously he got himself referred, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because he didn't know. I mean, and again, that's just, it doesn't seem to matter how old you are. There's this naivety or ignorance that rules of conduct and ethics isn't really that important, and it's probably the most important competency. So, so it's an interesting role. Again, you have to approach it very carefully. We've just put 3 senior professionals through this last session. We're still waiting on the results. In fact, the results come out tomorrow. So fingers crossed that we get a good result. There is one other small route, which I will mention. Well, actually, there's 2 others. One's academic, which I have to say, I've never met an academic candidate. So I don't really know masses about that. So I'm not going to talk much about that today. But another one is senior specialist, which is a bit akin to a senior professional, but someone who might be very focused and niche. So that's, I've only ever met and supported one of those in all my years of doing this. Whereas senior professional probably supported 50 or 60 of those, normal candidates, thousands. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, that's a nice little walk through then different routes, and hopefully that will help people select the right one. Make sure that they're on the right route to becoming a chartered surveyor rather than, and I think there's clear evidence and things that have been discussed there that people might get a bit confused with different routes. Certainly I've learned a few things. So thanks for that.
That's okay. I've got one small little case study just to point out the point in case. It was about 10 years ago. A chap turned up at one of my RTA surgeries and he said, "Oh, I work for now, can't remember the name of the company, a huge haulage firm. And it was based in the UK, in Europe, and in America, I think it was at the time." And he said, "Oh, I'm doing the whatever route it was. I think it's like the 12-month route." He'd been told, "Oh, go and do the 12-month route in valuation." And after he had explained to me the fact that he was overseeing 40,000 staff and acres and acres of storage space, and he traveled around the world every week and all this sort of stuff, I said, "Just out of interest, do you do any valuations?" And he said, No. I have people come in and do them for me." I said, I haven't got time to do that. I'm looking at all the strategy and everything. And it was just like, yeah, you're never going to pass your APC. And that stopped him in his tracks for a moment. He went, "What?" And I said, "Well, if you're not doing it, you're not going to achieve it." I said, "Have you considered senior professional, and have you considered maybe a different pathway like FM, maybe, because you're overseeing and managing all and this whole strategy and everything?" He said, "No." He said, "This was one I was told I had to go and do." And I said, "Well, did anyone talk to you about what you did when they said that?" He goes, "No." So I put him in touch with one of our guys, and he ended up sitting senior professional FM and passing it first time.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he would, if he'd gone forward for valuation at level 3, and he'd never done, or he hadn't
never done one valuation.
He's probably done one, yeah, because he's got other people in there to do it because he's too senior, and he stepped away from the coalface. And that's always been in my back of my mind is, I won't ever leave anyone without asking the question, "So what are you doing?" Because that is such an important question to ask, because if you're not doing it, you're never going to pass.
Yeah.
So picking the right route is really important.
Yeah, I think it is. And so some good tips there. Thanks for walking us through it.
That's okay. I feel like I've said everything and you said nothing today.
Well, you're the
I like
expert
you.
in these areas, and so I turned to interviewer in that.
Yeah, that's right. We must find something that you're good at.
We must find something that I'm good at. I mean, I've spent 42 years trying to find something I'm good at, and still haven't quite.
Pulling your leg. We'll talk
Maybe
surveying. You can do us some case studies on.
Maybe we'll do some building
beetles
surveying
and bugs and weird stuff that I know nothing about. Then
yeah, maybe we will. So, okay, then I'll let you close because you've done all the talking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Don't forget to go to our webpage now, because we said you can now leave feedback on our form.
Indeed.
And I hope you enjoyed today. And we look forward to doing our next one. We've got some really good podcasts lined up. We've got some guest speakers or guest podcasters, I should say, who are coming along. So that should be good fun.
Yeah, lots coming up.
And as always, we always say, stay safe, wash your hands, and
don't lick any strangers.
Talk to you soon. Cheers. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us for our latest episode of the Surveyor Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed making it. Don't forget to subscribe at all your favourite podcast providers: Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and so on. Also on Twitter and Instagram at SurvPod, that's SURVPOD. You can also get us on YouTube. Click the subscribe button, and don't forget to click the little bell. It tells you when we post our latest content, and on our webpage, survpod.com. Don't forget to leave us your reviews, comments, suggestions, and of course any questions. And finally, if you want to come along, join us at a future episode of the Surveyor Podcast, send us an email to survpod@gmail.com. If you like what you see and hear, tell your friends. Let's put surveying on the map. Stay safe, wash your hands, and don't lick any strangers. Bye-bye for now. The Surveyor Podcast is a copyright Deliver and Invise Limited production. We suggest you come up with your own ideas and not copy ours. Thank you. Catch you again soon. Bye-bye.